Welcome back to The Revolution with myself and Mike Fanone. And today we are joined by Yasmin Radjy from Swing Left, which, if people aren't familiar with Swing Left, they are an organization that focuses on general election, not primary stuff. And we have a lot going on that we need to talk about. We might as well get it done right off the bat before we get into the good stuff. Swing left. Sometimes you swing and sometimes it's a miss. We got to talk. We got to talk about Graham Platner. What the happened?
Yes. Well, by the time this is out there, a lot of things might change. But so Swing Left, for background for listeners who are unfamiliar, we focus on the most competitive races in the country, and we support the Democratic nominee that can defeat the Republican nominee. Our entire focus is how do we get to majorities, and our membership, we've got about 1 million members around the country. They're a pretty even split between folks who identify as more moderate and more progressive. And what they come to us for is they've got some amount of time, they've got some amount of money, they want to direct it to winning and to winning power. And there's a lot of noise in terms of the filters of how do you win power with grassroots time and money. The Maine Senate race is unequivocally one of the most important races in the country. Defeating Susan Collins, I know you all have talked a lot about this, is not optional. She is a disaster for our country. She is one of the most effective sort of like moderate MAGA members in moderate sheep's clothing. And so it was very clear the moment that Graham Platner won the primary that we'd be all in for this race. What has shifted for us, and the reason, it's been a dramatic couple of days, hours, depending on when this is all aired, is, the bottom line is, as things are right now, Graham Platner cannot defeat Susan Collins because the sort of well of dollars and the well of grassroots support has entirely dried up. And so if we want to defeat Susan Collins, we need a change at the top of the ticket. And that is, our community, we've got folks who are incredibly inspired and excited by Graham Platner during the primary and during the general election. We've got a lot of folks who were not so excited about him, but knew we got to defeat Susan Collins. This is who we've got. So this is not, from our perspective, we don't have an opinion about whether we like or don't like our candidates. It is who can win. And right now, Graham Platner cannot win against Susan Collins. I think by the time folks are watching this recording, he probably will have dropped out. And if and when that happens, we hope to be able to add Maine back onto our map, but we can, in good faith, tell folks who have limited grassroots time and grassroots dollars to invest in a race that is not winnable, again, not because of personal feelings about the race, but because you need time and money and support in order to win a race against someone who is as effective of a manipulator as Susan Collins. And she is really one of the best. It's like her and Mike Lawler, I think, are the best at playing moderates on TV. And so we've got to be all in on a really strong candidate being able to defeat her.
Well, we've finished talking about that. I was going to actually toss to you, Mike, anyway, because I know you had thoughts on the race. But okay, so that's all fair. That all makes sense because we want to be able to win, and Graham Platner right now is not screaming winner. Mike, I know you had an opinion on it as soon as the news broke.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to politicians, like I'm married to the message, not necessarily the messenger. I think one of the risks that you run with looking for candidates who are authentic, people who speak from the heart, which I believe Graham Platner was an authentic candidate. I think he did, in fact, speak from the heart, is that you run that risk of someone who has not been prepping themselves for decades to hold political office. Normal people, regular people have baggage. They are deeply flawed, like myself. And so, my hope is that there's still enough time before the November election. I think, Graham Platner, the best thing that he can do is step aside immediately. And, if he wants to participate, start looking for a replacement candidate that that carries the same message, that Maine voters can get behind the same way that they got behind his populist message.
Yeah, and also I did see Devin Murphy Anderson from Maine Democrats mentioned, she did put up a video that said his campaign is actually putting a little bit of pressure on them to be involved with either who his replacement is or just not dropping out at all. And so I know we're all watching this, and hopefully by watching the race. And so hopefully by the time this airs, we will see that we're having momentum towards picking a candidate who can win. But this now changes your slate and where you can direct your energy right now. And so there are races like the Talarico race. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and if Ken Paxton continues to shoot himself in the foot as he gallivants around the world with his mistress?
I can. Yeah, those clips have been incredible. Truly, the hypocrisy on the other side knows no bounds, and he is the living embodiment of that. I did before, and I really want to talk about Texas. I also just want to reflect on something that Michael was saying. At Swing Left, we are organizers more than anything. We talk a lot about how we are not here to stand politicians. We are here to stand democracy. I learned what stan was from my Gen Z colleagues. It's to be a big fan of. I am a very proud elder millennial. But I think it's really important. And I do think something, Michael, that you said that has been really on my mind in not just the past 24, 48 hours of Platner news, but throughout a lot of the discourse around this election is, I think it is really essential, no matter where folks sort of landed in this debacle, is that voters are very clear, and the Democratic base is really clear in a feeling that the system is broken. And as organizers at Swing Left, we spend a lot of time going and knocking on doors and talking to voters directly. We talk not just to Democrats, we talk to Republicans and independents. I hope we can talk later about the Ground Truth program that we're running, where we are having deep, long conversations with voters at their doors of all political persuasions. And the most consistent thing that we hear from those voters is a feeling like the system is broken, a feeling that both parties suck, and that they feel like their voice is meaningless in a system where, there's only so much that they can do. And I think that's a lot of the origin story of the MAGA movement. I think it's a lot of the origin story for why so many Democrats stayed home in the last election. And I think what we saw in what resonated, the fact that Graham Platner had the biggest volunteer operation ever in Maine's history, I think whether people liked him or didn't like him, whether his message resonated with them personally or not, we have to really not lose the learning of he was able to talk about what feels broken about the system and break through to people. And I think part of my worry in this has become the world of, what I call the kind of statement industrial complex of everyone is putting out statements that are a reinforcement of their existing perspectives during the primary. I think it is really important, first of all, as Michael said, that he drops out of this race and that we get a new candidate, because the priority's got to be defeating Susan Collins. And that we learn that there is something that he was able to do in breaking through to people, in making people who feel like the system is broken, like they could have their voice heard, that we can't sort of like lose that lesson because of this debacle. And so, I say all of that as a kind of big picture. I think what's happening in Texas is another example of James Talarico, very different candidate. He and Graham Platner have very different personalities. What is compelling about each of them is very, very different, but he is able to communicate about what feels broken about our system in a way that is resonant for members of the Democratic base like myself, but it's also really resonant with voters who are sick and tired of the corruption that Ken Paxton is the poster boy for. It is hard. I challenge us all to think about a politician more corrupt than Ken Paxton, who is getting away with virtual murder, maybe also literal murder in the state of Texas. But, people are tired of that. And I think that is something that if candidates, that's going to be a really tough race. Texas is like a country. It is not like a state. Communicating and organizing in a state that big will require a lot of all hands on deck and a lot of real serious investment and real trust rebuilding with voters. I think he and his operation will be able to do that. Partners at Texas Majority PAC will be able to do that. But, I think what we're seeing in more and more of the Senate races that are lean Republican, like Texas, that are potential toss-ups like Maine was until this debacle, other toss-ups like Alaska, that's only 11.6% Democrat, and that is a toss-up race now. It's candidates who are able to communicate about what feels broken and are able to, help us on the journey of rebuilding trust in what Democrats can do when Democrats fight.
And part of building trust is listening. And that is a key part of one of the programs that you have introduced, Ground Truth. And we talk about this all the time on here, that politicians have a hard time reading the room. And right now, you guys are doing this work. Can you talk about what this program is and if it's being implemented sort of in all states or the key races? I'd love to hear more about it.
Yes. So Swing Left, we've always been about, again, channeling grassroots time and dollars to the most competitive elections. And we've always done that in coordination with campaigns. And that is great when a campaign is thinking big about the power of really engaging voters. But the state of where things are today at all levels of the ballot in most places is that Democrats tend to talk to voters way too late, way too transactionally. The goal is how many doors do you knock, not how many real engagements and real conversations are you having. And the costs of that are not are not just, although the losses are very big, they are not just electoral losses. The consequences of that are that we have really lost trust with voters. And losing trust is not something that you can just magically snap your fingers and change through a TV ad. Building trust takes time. And as you said, building trust starts with listening. And so after the losses of the 2024 election cycle, we looked really hard at ourselves in the mirror and asked ourselves the question of, are we focused on the right things of just channeling volunteers and dollars to competitive races when we know that a lot of the ways that their time and dollars are being used is insufficient for rebuilding that trust? And so Ground Truth is a program where we have volunteers all across the country and 45 House races and 9 Senate races who are going out and knocking every door. And we say that in the literal sense and in the figurative sense of they are not skipping doors because someone has a Trump sign in their front yard. They're not skipping doors because someone is too strong of a Democrat and therefore we shouldn't waste time trying to talk to them. We are talking to everyone. We also say knock every doors in the figurative sense, because sometimes voters are not home, especially in this economy. A lot of voters are not home when we go knock on their doors because they're working 2 jobs. They're working, and they don't have childcare. They're out of the house. So we also are talking to voters at the grocery store. I went in Alaska just last weekend or 2 weekends ago, talked to voters at a gas station. Wherever we are talking to those voters, what we are doing, what our volunteers around the country are doing, is asking open-ended questions about how folks feel about the direction of our country and what their barriers to voting for Democrats are. And what our volunteers are trained to do is to listen, not to be a policy expert, not to memorize a bunch of focus group tested talking points, but to ask probing questions. And so a classic example of this is volunteers are really freaked out about, well, what happens if I knock on someone's door and they say I voted for Trump? It happens all the time. A lot of the conversations that we're having are with people who voted for Trump. And what we are training them to do in the interest of really listening and understanding in order to then build the trust needed to persuade people. So we say, if they say, I don't know, you want to talk to me, I voted for Trump, ask them the question of, if Donald Trump were standing here on your doorstep right next to me and you had 2 minutes with him, what would you say to him? And 1 in 4 of the very strong Republicans that we are talking to, folks who, in sort of technical speak, we call it their Democratic propensity score is so low, no Democratic campaign would ever waste time talking to them. Those 1 in 4 of those folks are expressing really strong anti-Trump sentiment. They are very disappointed. They are very angry. They feel like they were sold a bill of goods that, they want a refund. And then 2, they're expressing real openness to voting for Democrats. And I say all of that because trust, again, does not get rebuilt overnight. The first step is listening. The second step is all those volunteer conversations that are rich, that are long. These are like 10, 15-minute long conversations. They're not a 30-second flyer drop. We are taking the insights from those conversations, and our canvassers all have an app where they then hit record and they do a voice memo repeating back everything that they talked about. And those insights don't just come to me at Swing Left to read an interesting memo about. They make it back to the campaign. We use large language models to then analyze those insights, excuse me, so that candidates, whether the candidate is curious in their heart of hearts or not, whether they are authentic in their heart of hearts or not, the answers differ from candidate to candidate. We need candidates to be rooted on the ground. And if candidates are hearing from voters, if they're hearing unfiltered the complaints that voters have about them, about Democrats, about the bill of goods that they were sold by the Republican Party, that is how then candidate campaigns can start the tough work of rebuilding trust, of actually investing in persuasion. The art of persuasion has been lost on us as Democrats for far too long. And to us, we think that that is work that needs to start from the bottom up with grassroots volunteers who really, really give a shit about the future of our country and feel infantilized by campaigns too often of like, we've got the perfect message for you, don't worry about it. Volunteers want to be a part of the solution, and they want to make sure that their candidates, whether they are the dream candidate that they've always wanted and that person inspires them more than anybody, or whether it is just the candidate that is going to be their ticket to making sure that we get to a Republican, that we end a Republican majority. Either way, that volunteers are a part of changing the balance of power.
I'm curious, Yasmin, in the conversations that you have and your organization have had across the country, what is the biggest roadblock that that people are telling you that they have to voting for Democratic candidates? Because I can tell you, in my conversations, it's two things. One, it's the image that party leadership projects. People like Hakeem Jeffries and what's his name, the senator Schumer. Yeah. Sorry, that they're just like unrelatable and seen, quite frankly, as cowardly, especially in this moment in which so many Democrats have been saying that this administration poses a clear and present danger to our democracy, but yet, everything will be okay until the midterms, just vote Democrat. And then the other thing is just a lack of a plan. Like what is it that we are for? Obviously, we're against everything this administration is doing, the unconstitutional actions, the inhumanity of the administration, but what are we for? I'm curious what people are saying to you.
Yeah, I mean, the top thing that we hear over and over and over again is I'm not sure how I can support Democrats because I don't know what Democrats stand for besides being anti-Trump. And in the places where we've got a candidate who's gotten through their primary, and we can talk about that candidate, we can often talk about how that candidate, not the Democratic Party on the whole, or, the kind of like generic brand or the party committees and so on and so forth. We can say, what this Democrat, this individual candidate is for. And oftentimes what that candidate is for, the answer is actually like pretty specific to the district, what they've done for the district, what they understand. So it's actually a pretty localized message. In the places, and we get this feedback from our volunteers, in the places that are not, where there's not a candidate yet, where we are talking about, we're doing anti-Republican messaging, where we are collecting information, we're doing that listening, our volunteers are like the most hardcore Democrats out there, right? Like they're spending their weekends, oftentimes schlepping for a couple of hours to the closest competitive swing district, spending the day going and talking to voters. Those volunteers are struggling with the answer of generically answering, what do Democrats stand for besides being anti-Trump? So we've got a lot of work to do as a party. And I think the good news is we can answer in the specifics, candidate by candidate, but we've got to move out of this posture. And I hear it all the time here in the Beltway of, the way that we win elections is just through the negativity of, all the terrible things that Trump has done. I am motivated every day by the shit that Trump does every day to damage people and by the dangers of this administration. But also people are really tired and they want to see not just what are we against, but what are we for? And, to a point that I think you made that's really spot on is what's the plan, right? Like, I think we've talked a lot over the past year about the appetite and energy that people have for fighters. And that is absolutely true. People want someone who's going to fight for them, but they don't want a sort of like a generic pablum about, yeah, I'm ready to fight. It's like, well, what's the proof? What are you going to do? And also do you actually get what I'm going through? And I think so much of what we are hearing from folks on the doors is a real and genuine shock and surprise and confusion that someone actually has curiosity about what they're going through. And they're like, you're not going to, I talked to a woman for literally 30 minutes at her door in Anchorage, Alaska. And she was just like, I don't understand why you're talking to me. I don't know anything. I don't know anything. She kept repeating, I don't know anything. I think you want to go to the next door. And I'm like, man, we are here to talk to you. And it feels so countercultural for people to feel heard, to feel like they have a lived experience that someone actually cares about, that they want to communicate back to a potential candidate. And I think that's the stuff that, it's not just about like, let's go focus group. What's the message of what Democrats stand for besides being anti-Trump? It's got to connect to people feeling like their candidates actually see them and understand them, even if their candidates might be different from them. And I think that's the big thing. And then the final piece that I talked about earlier, but I think is really essential here, is not just with Democrats, but across the board, people feel like the system is broken. And I think this gets at something that you were saying, Michael, of when they feel like a candidate is just a part of the system, it's just not flying right now. And so I think the challenge before us is, once we win a majority, how do we make sure that A, candidates are showing a proactive vision, elected officials are showing proactive vision or getting things done, but B, that it doesn't feel like, well, we've just gone on this kind of like whiplash of, we had a Republican majority, nothing happened. Now we have a Democratic majority, nothing's happening. And I think that's a big challenge ahead of us.
Well, it feels like people are reaching a breaking point, to the point where they're willing to try something new, something different. And you talk about candidates needing to take risks, that Democrats need to take risks in this context of these upcoming races. And we've got, the Iran war breaking out again. We've got so many subject matters where they could take risks. Where's the, I guess, safe place to take a risk right now, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think on the risk point, something I've been reflecting on a lot is how static the way campaigns learn about what voters care about is. Of like, a House race maybe has the budget to do one focus group. Maybe. Some House races aren't even going to do a focus group. So they're getting some polling information, they're getting some vibes checks. And so if you did your one focus group at the beginning of the campaign in 2025, it's pretty clear the only people talking, for example, about national security are really hardcore people who care about national security. That's not that many people. It's like 2% was how much national security was coming up in our door-to-door conversations in 2025. Immigration, the only people talking about immigration are hardcore Republicans who want to talk about border security. So the low risk option is just like, don't talk about either of those things. Well, we're in a very different world today. And what we've seen in most of these districts is over half of the conversations are about the Iran war. But they're not like foreign policy wonks have suddenly invaded every swing district in the country. It's like people are not stupid, and they understand that the reason their gas prices are really expensive is because Trump is doing all kinds of wild shit all around the world, including, namely in Iran, but all over the place. Like, who knows what he's going to do in Greenland? Like, that stuff is breaking through to people. So over half of the conversations we're having are about some version of national security and foreign policy. And a campaign that just did their focus group a year ago and isn't getting that texture on the ground, and maybe isn't spending a lot of time talking to voters, because the incentives of our politics are they've got to go raise so much money. They're like in a windowless office doing call time to raise the dollars they need to be able to be competitive. Well, that's a big problem, right? Because then their risk calculus is wrong. And actually the right thing to do is to talk in that district about the war with Iran and what it means for affordability. But they may be making a risk calculus that was true in 2025. And ditto on immigration. Immigration was coming up in these districts in a tough on border, strong Republican way until Minneapolis. And then what our volunteers experienced in all sorts of very diverse swing districts across the country was all of a sudden Republicans and independents were having really complicated feelings about immigration. Still tough on the border, but also like, what the hell is ICE doing? What is this all about? Reflecting with our, in conversations with our volunteers about immigrants in their own community. And, if we had talked to someone who owned a contracting business, what this meant for his workers. These are the kinds of things where I think like some of the ways that we as Democrats make risk calculus risk calculi are actually divorced from where voters are. And part of that is our campaign mechanics don't root us sufficiently in voters. The incentives of talking to voters are actually quite limited. And that's part of what we're trying to do with Swing Left and with Ground Truth, is make sure that every competitive campaign is hearing from voters all the time, including from the voters that don't agree with us on everything. And, my general perspective is I've organized my entire career in advocacy and campaigns. Humans are strange. Humans are idiosyncratic. All of us have contradictions. We think about voters as these like pure, they agree with us on everything or they agree with us on nothing. Voters are humans, and humans are strange. And so the more we are talking to them, the more we understand their idiosyncrasies, and we can make the right risk calculus about how to break through, how to talk to people, and also how to deal with the shades of gray of the world as it is.
Yeah, I love hearing this, because as a former comedian, I'm going to say now, being able to listen and adjust and take risks is the only way to make real progress, which is what disrupts a pattern. And right now we're just in this rut that people are sort of feeling. So we've got several months before the general election. I know people who are watching are interested in contributing, volunteering. What does it take to be a good, I don't want to say ground truther, because anytime I say truther, what does it take to be a good canvasser, to have these deep conversations?
The only criteria is curiosity. I think a lot of folks assume that they will not be good at voter contact because they're an introvert. Some of the best canvassers I have ever met are really introverted, and their introversion actually is a real skill on the doors because they're curious and they're open and they're asking real questions. They're not just yapping at someone's door to a stranger. A lot of folks think a barrier to their being a good canvasser is that they're not a policy expert. I can't tell you how many of the smartest volunteers that I have ever worked with in politics think that they don't know enough. Most really smart people feel like they don't know enough. And also, I have, in all my years of organizing, very few conversations at the doors have ever actually been about policy. They're about how people are feeling, what they're going through. And of course, all of that is really political. It all relates to policy. But I've never had a voter quiz me of like, what do you think of this piece of legislation? That's just like not how humans are outside of where I live in DC and the Beltway. That does happen a lot here in the Beltway. So I think that the only consistent criteria in what makes a really good ground truth canvasser or phone banker, we also have ground truth phone banks, is someone who's curious and someone who is capable of asking questions. And I think curiosity is, in my opinion, something that is increasingly countercultural in our politics. So I think if we want to actually persuade people and expand the tent, and we want to win not just the midterms where the wind is at our backs, but win the presidential election in 2028, win the much tougher elections to come after that in 2030 and 2032, when the deck is going to be pretty stacked against us in terms of, we can get into the 2030 and 2032 of it all separately. But things are going to get much tougher if we are not curious and if we are not sort of authentically interested in other people, then we are going to have a tough time. And so we're excited to welcome anybody who wants to join us in being curious and talking to people across difference too. Can go to swingleft.org and join us for a ground truth canvas or ground truth phone bank in the most competitive swing district near them.
Mike, you're curious. You like to ask questions. I'm curious.
I think that's a bad idea. Really bad.
I think you'd make a great canvasser.
There's like certain people, I think if I knocked on their door, it just wouldn't, I don't think we wouldn't be getting the result that we were looking for.
What if I go with you? I've done some canvassing. It is terrifying at first. I am an introvert, but it's kind of addictive after the first couple of conversations. Then it's like, oh my God, I'm making friends with strangers.
Totally. We're going to work on you, Mike.
Yeah, no, I mean, who would ever thought that having productive conversations with people and listening to them was the key to winning them over. Maybe some prospective politicians could take a lesson from this.
Totally. That's our hope. That's our hope. I think if a lot more listening and a lot less lecturing in our politics, I think we would be able to enter a much more productive paradigm. And I think a lot of folks are really hungry for that.
100%. Last thing, because I like to pitch random ideas every so often, or maybe every episode I pitch something. Last week it was Love Island and an adaptation of Love Island called Civically Engaged, where you have people from across the political spectrum potentially falling in love in order to bring people together. This week, I want to pitch to you specifically. Comedians are really good at talking to strangers and listening and reading the room. What if you had comedians canvassing, comedians who canvas and they join and they do improv and they make people laugh and they go door to door? You can hate my idea. It's okay. I
love that idea. But as an organizer, I'm going to have to say, there's a great opportunity for you to make that idea happen by joining us at Swing Left and starting the Comedians Who Canvas campaign.
Fair. She threw it right back at me. All right. We have work to do, Mike. Okay. We're getting you out there. We're getting the comedians out there. I just put something on my to-do list of amazing Yasmin Radjy, Swing Left. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody go find them, donate, volunteer, and maybe we'll see you out there knocking doors.
I can't wait. I'll be following up, and thank you both for what you do, and also for engaging in a refreshing kind of politics that is about people, which is what politics really should be about, and is also how we're going to win these really important elections.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're not going to knock on doors with me, Mike? Come on.
No. That's a horrible idea.
I think it's a reality show waiting to happen. You and me with our canvassing materials, our clipboards. I love a clipboard.
You know what I like? Immediately when you brought that up a few seconds ago, what the image that came to mind was there was this show that was called Cheaters. I don't know if you remember the show, and they would with the spouses would team up with the host, and they would surprise the cheating spouse as they were in the act. And there was a lot of Motel 6 door knocks, but there was one that I remember specifically. And it was the guy was out on a boat and he was with the girl that he was cheating on his wife with. And the host and the wife pull up in another boat, and the guy ends up stabbing the host. Jesus. And I just think to myself, that's what I would knock on a door. I would smile. I would say, "Hey, I'm Mike Fanone."
That would not be the episode. It would go viral. I'm sure we'd get great clips out of that, of me trying to. All right. Well, then maybe we should leave the canvassing to the professionals and the volunteers. But I'm going to think this one through, because I do think it would be fun to get some comedians out there on the ground. So this is our first conversation since 4th of July weekend. So much going on in the world. Do we want to start with the good stuff first? Like your World Cup, you got to attend the World Cup and I didn't. How was that experience before we go into the bad things? How was being there on the ground?
I was telling Sam, our esteemed producer, offline earlier that it was the greatest sports experience that I've ever had in my entire lifetime.
Tell me more.
Amazing. Listen, I've been to World Series. I've been to Super Bowls. There's just something about so it was in Philly. My ex-wife and I took the kids. We drove up to Philadelphia. We stayed at a Marriott downtown, and they had set up in the lobby bar. They had set up a place where people could watch the games, and they had a bunch of TVs out. And it was just, you had people from, we were sitting at a table watching the game with people from Colombia, people from France, people from Paraguay. There were visitors there from Spain, Germany, Belgium. I mean, literally the whole world was represented. There were even some people there that were from Japan, and we were all laughing and drinking and having a great time. My kids had a blast. Everybody was incredibly friendly. It was just a unique experience, 100% positive. Listen, the game, we went to see France and Paraguay. We were rooting for France. My kids are big Mbappe fans, as is probably a third of the world. Yeah. But it was an amazing game. It was hotter than hell, but we didn't care. I had 10 margaritas. Thank you, Casamigos, for setting up that glorious mixed margarita stand right outside of section 119 where I was sitting. It was refreshing, and it made the day even that more enjoyable. But it was great. I mean, the atmosphere, everything about it was amazing. And then, to get to part 2 of the story, we come back, we're still like high on, World Cup fever, and fast forward to the U.S. game and the red card, and Donald Trump makes a phone call and intervenes. And it just, listen, I'm not going to say it soured the whole thing, but one, I think, the U.S. needs to recognize the fact that we are not on the same level as, the vast majority of clubs on this planet. And we're also newcomers to the sport. And the way that intervention was viewed by the world just put us in it was awful. To say that Donald Trump, like, he fucking ruins
everything.
Ruins everything. And then it just launched the whole thing. And listen, I'm not going to deny, like, the World Cup has always been political. There's politics intermixed. Sports figures have been making political statements since the inception of sports, and rightfully so. That being said, this was like, it was like having a player's mom call the league and argue on behalf of, her son or daughter's team, who, by the way, the company that she works for sponsors that team, and then having the league intervene on their behalf. But it also provided this incredible opportunity for the United States men's national team. And I was hoping that they would take the opportunity and prove to the entire world that this is a nation of honor and integrity, that is just as passionate about this sport and has just as much respect for this sport as all the other teams that have been involved in play for decades before we came along. And we didn't. And that opportunity was this. The coach of the men's national team could have sat Boligan. He could have said, listen, Mr. President, we appreciate you intervening on our behalf. However, we've been practicing with Pepe, the replacement for Boligan, for the past 4 days. If you recall, Trump intervened literally like 5 days after after the red card was issued. And Trump could have saved face. The men's national team would have been hailed as the heroes of the day, regardless of whether they won or lost, which inevitably they were going to lose because Belgium is just that much better than the men's national team. But it just was an opportunity for us to shine. And we didn't take it, and we lost, and it was embarrassing. And now, we're going to have to live with that, being the team that, Trump intervened on their behalf, and we still lost.
We did. And I have to say, I'm going to come out with a hard disagree on benching him and not playing him, because I don't think any other selection would have done that if it were in their, if the same thing happened. I don't think France would have done it. I don't think Argentina would do it. I think their presidents wouldn't intervene, but if they did, they would still play that player, because I think there is an all's fair in football sort of situation. So I don't mind that the head coach put him in. I obviously wanted the U.S. to win, but all of these teams, FIFA is so corrupt. I have a friend, Adrian, in Spain, who speaks on this quite a bit. FIFA is so corrupt across the board that it's not just Trump dealing in corruption. It's all of the teams. I joked when they pulled that the goal from Egypt. I was like, oh, did Malay get on the phone that quickly with FIFA to be able to get that goal pulled? So I think there's so much corruption. But I want to focus on the good part, which is what you started with, which is their FIFA unites the world is actually true in many, many ways. Like, this is a time where you do have people from so many different cultures, different languages coming together. And even though they're on opposing sides, they're still, by and large, mostly able to get along and celebrate together. And it's just, once again, an indication that the average person just wants to enjoy life and doesn't hate people from other countries and doesn't hate understanding or learning about other cultures, but in fact actually embraces it. And so I see a lot of hope in the World Cup, aside from the corruption with FIFA and the hydration breaks and all of the things that people hate. I see people being really just engaged with each other, hugging strangers often, sharing drinks with strangers. It's like a whole sort of, a month or so of what the world could be, what the world should be, if they would just allow us to be this way. And so that's what I take out of the World Cup. And I've been watching almost every game. I've been staying up till 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning to watch these games. I was very upset that I stayed up late, and then the US lost so terribly. I was like, really? I stayed up late for this, and I made a cake. But I think it's an opportunity, and I'm hoping, because notice you're not hearing a lot of the anti-immigrant rhetoric coming from MAGA during the World Cup, except for now. I think there might be some issue because the US lost, and I think there are some accounts, and maybe they're bot accounts, I don't know if they're real accounts, calling for Balogun to be deported, even though he's a US citizen and doesn't actually live in the US anyway. But for the most part, the World Cup is bringing out the best in people. When you said Japan, it reminded me of what Trump said about the Islamic Republic of Japan. I think it's a good time to transition to that clip. Can we roll that clip?
We had 111 missiles shot by the Islamic Republic of Japan. They were shot at the aircraft carrier over.
I don't even know what the fuck he was talking about.
The war that we're not even in, right? Because it wasn't a war. It was an excursion that was going to be over in a few days. First of all, several months ago. And now the ceasefire, it's weird that the Islamic Republic of Japan could fire missiles at us, because I thought we destroyed their military, and also the Islamic Republic of Japan doesn't exist. How are we here? How are we here, Michael? Because at that point, shouldn't somebody just drag him out of his seat? Shouldn't somebody just can someone take one for the team and just drag him out of his seat? That not in a metaphorically drag him out of the seat. I don't know if that's a crime, what I just said.
I'm always waiting for there's a reporter I'm a big fan of, SD Vate, and I think he's the only one to date that has actually said, like, Donald Trump, do you ever get tired of lying to the American people as much as you do in a press conference? I'm always waiting for that moment to be recreated after one of these like insane statements that Trump makes in calling him out. And, but for whatever reason, our esteemed corporatist mainstream media doesn't feel like that would be a productive use of their time. But it, like you said, it's so crazy. It's so outrageous. It's and it's, I don't know. I mean, embarrassing. Is that the only word that's left? I guess is that nobody there are people that have the power to stop this. They're called members of Congress. They exist.
Do they?
I think
Do
they're
they
on, well, physically, they physically exist. But for whatever reason, they are incapable of simply protecting America from Donald Trump.
It's so frustrating to have celebrated our 250th year and have a man like Donald Trump consistently. We're gonna have a do-over. I'm big on do-overs, so we're gonna have to have a do-over. I feel like it's only a matter of time at this point because with the constant dementia, with his diet, with his behavior, I just can't imagine it lasting that much longer, which is why we need a plan. Democrats, independents need a plan for what people want and what we need to be able to do to rectify everything that this man has done to the country. So that's my assignment to myself. Is I've got a dry erase board right here. You can't see it, but I'm going to put on my vision board what I want for the US, what I want for the world once he's gone. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that's a valid use of your time. Hopefully, somebody will actually pay attention and listen to, just like Yasmin was saying, hopefully somebody will start listening to the American people and what it is that they want from their politics and what it is that they want from their government going forward. Because maybe if a political party like the Democrats, that seems to be semi-functioning, at least, would listen to voters and give them policies that deliver on the things that they want, maybe they'd get elected.
Yeah, well, I hope it's Democrats because it might be Marjorie Taylor Greene's and Tucker Carlson, I think, are talking about starting up a party. And I'm like, no, that's okay. We don't need you guys to do any of that. We'd like you to stay on your fringe, wherever he is right now. Stay fringe.
Yeah. And it makes me angry every time somebody from the mainstream media puts a microphone in front of Marjorie Taylor Greene's face, as if anything that she has to say matters. Because it doesn't. Her opinion was only valid when she was a member of Congress. And even then, I think there's an argument to be made against it, other than the fact that she was in some form or fashion representing her district and then also representing a segment of America that perhaps we would be better off without. That being said, other than the fact that they think that it's going to generate some buzz, why are we platforming people like that? Why are we platforming, when are we going to get back to that point in time in which there's disqualifying statements that, preclude you from being able to use these important platforms that we have, free press, semi-free press in America. And they lose their credibility when they allow people like that to communicate en masse with the public unchecked because most of what she says is fucking bullshit.
Well, this is obviously just the trickle-down effect of having Trump in the highest office of the land, because now credibility does not matter. You don't need credibility to get clicks. And that's all that matters to all of these news outlets, to a lot of these pundits, to even to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't think she wants to make any difference in the world. I think she just wants the attention. Tucker Carlson just wants the attention. They had an opportunity when they were in the party to make a difference. And so as long as
she has no integrity, she doesn't have any, she doesn't care about America. I mean, this is a person who entered into office with a net worth of $700,000 and left office with a net worth of $70 million. She's somebody who resigned because she just couldn't be a part of, this Trump, presidency. But she waited until the day after she was eligible to collect her pension, a lifetime pension, which includes health insurance, which the vast majority of Americans, either can't afford or don't have access to at all. And so it's like, shut the fuck up.
I think it's a perfect place to end.
Go back.
And good night.
Go back to that hole from which you came and fucking stay there.
Yeah. Yes, please. Yes, please. But a reminder, everybody, that I think she was just like basically a gym owner. So if you are somebody who doubted your ability to contribute to society or participate in politics, please know that you can run for office and you can potentially be an excellent candidate for Democrats. And yeah, as you said earlier, Mike, we all have baggage, but I'd like to point out that I am not sure. I'm trying to think of how many women candidates we've had that have had the kind of baggage that some of the men have brought into the Democratic Party. That's all I'm going to say on that. Women should run the world. Okay. Also and now I'm done.
I'm down for, listen, you talked about earlier, like people are looking for something different. Like I'm up for, a woman-run, women-controlled government.
Like, just give us as much time as you guys have had. Okay, like
women already control my entire life. So having them run the government is just not a big leap from where I'm at right now. I've got 4 daughters and 2 baby mamas. So.
And it probably creates the structure